but they're going to talk. And that is the point of the prisoner's dilemma, is that it drives you to this action that may not be the best action, but it is the equilibrium point. Now, the way out of this is to have a mob boss. Okay. So so the way organized crime works is that the mob boss comes in and says, "Hey, I'll tell you what, if you talk, I'm gonna kill you. It doesn't matter what the police say, you're just gonna be
Yeah.
dead."
There's
So
no jail can save you.
no jail can save you. So you're just gonna have to keep your mouth shut. So as a result, it forces everybody into this silent situation where they all have to be quiet because there's this outside force that's exerting control. So then you get into all these other things. Well, what if we give you, witness protection and blah
Yeah.
blah blah, right? But
Yeah.
it's that external force that is keeping them in place. And this is an important thing to remember as we look at how this applies to politics. So the next thing to think about is that we have A and B, and these are again A and Bartholomew, but instead of criminals, they are voters, and they favor a third party candidate rather than the Democrat or the Republican. We face a similar dilemma when it comes to third parties. If A is a Democrat and B is a Republican, they may both prefer a third party candidate, but they also both know that there's no second place, that only the one with the most votes wins, and the Republicans and Democrats are almost certainly going to get more votes than the third party. So, even though they might both prefer it, and we could say that A and B, if they both vote for the third party, then the third party wins. They also know, the Republican knows that if they vote for the third party and the Democrat votes for the Democrats, well, then the Democrat's going to win. And the Democrat knows that if they vote for the third party and the Republican votes for the Republican, then the Republican wins. So this creates that stable but suboptimal equilibrium where everyone votes for traditional parties, even when everybody agrees a better alternative might exist. So the system mathematically prevents third parties from gaining traction regardless of their merits. Now, we can even take this a step further and look at this from a political party standpoint, because it also impacts the politicians, their campaigns, and their policies. So, again, like prisoners in a dilemma, both Democrats and Republicans face a choice. They can campaign or govern constructively, or they can go destructively, right? So they can promote ideas or they can attack the other side. Now, constructive arguments are tough. They're dangerous. They require you to take a stance. And it's always easy to find a problem with somebody taking a stance. There's always something a little bit wrong. They want to build a bridge, but it's the wrong color. You can always find something. And it's easier to stoke outrage about what somebody is doing versus what's not happening. So, we may prefer both sides to be constructive, because if they're both constructive, then they win on the merits. Whoever has the best program or the best idea wins. But the problem is that if the Democrat stays constructive and the Republican goes destructive, then the Republican wins, because this is the more engaging argument. And the other way here, right? Which means that they both have an incentive to go destructive. They're both going to go in this direction, which means that we end up with both Democrats and Republicans in the destructive camp. And this brings us to um, winning based on resources. And I would say winning based on consistency of message. So that's one area where the Republicans have demonstrated a clear strength, is in using their resources to have that very clear destructive message that people can relate to. They also get the money, and that puts them in the situation of winning in this construct. So now we have, again, that suboptimal Nash equilibrium around winning based on resources rather than winning based on merits. And it's important here to realize that neither party has to win. They just have to not lose, because there isn't a third opportunity. There isn't another option. And this reminds me of a joke. I learned this joke in South Africa, right? I was on a safari drinking gin and tonics behind a truck, and the guide pointed out lions on the ridge. And I asked if it was dangerous, that we're out here with lions. And he said, "Well, I've got good shoes on. And you?" And I said, "Well, wait, can we really outrun lions?" And he said, "No, of course not. But I just have to outrun
I'll
you."
run you. That's it.
And which is a well-known joke, right? But I didn't know it at the time, and I thought that was particularly funny. And then I got in the truck. But that's exactly what the political system is built towards, right? When it's win-lose, candidates don't need good ideas. They just need to be a little bit less worse than their opponent. They have to not lose. They
Yep.
have to not be eaten by the lion. So that brings both parties back to this destructive situation that results in political discourse focused on tearing down the opposition
Yeah.
rather than building up solutions. So the side with the most resources to invest in destructive messaging wins. But if you add a viable third party, then this changes, because they're like somebody sitting back on the truck with their feet up watching the drama unfold, right? They don't
Yeah.
have to participate in the destructive race to the bottom. So that would kind of force the other two parties to stop running around and come up with ideas. And it also, this is also important, it also gives place for stupid ideas. So there should always be stupid ideas out there. There should always be people talking about things that are blatantly wrong, that aren't going to work. Like, that's
Yeah.
actually
We're going to the
okay.
moon. You
Yeah.
need crazy ideas.
Well, but I mean,
even
even things that you hate, because it's when you tell them that they can't talk that they get the most power. If you've got one idiot out there on the street corner saying, "Hey, white supremacy," and everybody's looking at him like that's an idiot, well, that just strengthens the fact that that person's an idiot. But when they can't talk, then that makes their position stronger. So sometimes you actually even want these crazy idea parties because they stay really tiny and people see how tiny they are, and that really limits their voice. So there is a real argument for saying we want stupid ideas.